All right, welcome to the Bridge Podcast. I'm here with Randy Liedtke. Randy's a comedian, producer of various content, general funny guy. Randy, thanks for joining me.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
It's my pleasure. So I always start the interviews off basically asking about like coffee habits, coffee preferences, and I have a sense of your coffee habits, but can you update me on what they are and tell our listeners and stuff?
Yeah, okay. So I basically do like one shot of espresso every day. And for the most part, it's by before noon.
Okay.
Yeah, I have a home espresso machine and a little grinder, and I try to get free coffee from friends as much as I can.
hmm
And then I wake up. My ritual is I get up, I walk to the machine, I turn it on, I let it heat up, I cook breakfast. By the time I'm done with breakfast, I either have a shot of espresso or I'll cut it with like oat milk and ice.
Okay.
Sometimes I'll steam a drink, but for the most part, it's either a shot or like something I can sip on that will make it last a little longer.
Okay. And your preferences for like a milk down drink is a cold one?
Yeah, I think so. I don't If I do a hot one, I'd rather have like a macchiato or maybe a cappuccino. But even then, I kind of like to have just an ice drink that I can just kind of sip for 30 minutes to an
Okay.
hour. It's kind of nice to be like, ooh, I still have a little bit left. Uh,
And you just keep it to
yeah,
one shot per day?
yeah. When I worked in coffee, at times I got to more, but I find that I get really dehydrated
Mm.
and kind of strung out, and I have a hard time sleeping. So yeah, I got to do one shot, maybe if I'm feeling wild, but it's probably been like 8 months since I've been feeling wild. So
Gotcha.
just one shot. I actually brought a bag. I was just up in Oregon where I grew up, and I brought a bag of coffee home from a place in that area, and so I've been pulling shots with that this week. It's been really nice.
Nice.
Yeah.
Do you want to say what place it is?
Yeah, it's called Lone Pine Coffee. It's in Bend, Oregon.
Okay.
Uh, yeah, the guy's a nice guy, and he started it in a smaller town called Madras, and then built it, and then opened up a cafe in Bend, and then closed that one, opened a different one. Now has two in Bend, Oregon, and it's the best coffee in Central Oregon for sure. And nice cafe. It's really pretty stuff.
Nice. Ben's pretty
Yeah,
small, right?
yeah. It's probably. I mean, it's pushing. It's very close to 100,000 at this point, but it's still small. My hometown is like 30,000, but when I moved there it was like 15,000, and Bend was like 45,000. So it's
Gotcha.
uh it's small compared to most places.
Word. All right, cool.
Yeah.
Well, now our listeners know you as a coffee drinker.
Oh yeah.
So I've been watching some of your stuff, and it's indeed quite hilarious. First time meeting you, I wouldn't have expected you to be funny at all, but
What the heck does that mean?
I'm just kidding. I'm just
I mean,
uh,
whatever, maybe.
trying to riff here. No, but something that I noticed about your stuff is that like a lot of it is like the highest version of poop jokes, or like there's like a lot of bodily humor, but like you do it in a way that's still like really it really lands for me. And so you have this. I don't want to spoil the clip for anybody who hasn't seen it, but your whole
Oh
thing about
gosh.
weighing your poop.
Oh
Um,
yeah,
so
okay.
in my mind, I'm like, okay, like somebody is like he didn't do any of this in real life, but like the world that I'm into with like sort of like biohacky type shit. Part of me is like, I feel like he did maybe 70% of this in real life.
uh
How much of that did I mean? Like, were you really weighing your food? Is this like a calorie counting thing? Did you actually weigh your shit? Because I feel like there's somebody that does this.
no. I don't know. I feel like anything that you saw is like pretty old. Like I kind of took a big break from stand up, even like a few years before the pandemic, and I'm just getting back into it and writing a lot now. And it's interesting writing now as a person compared to who I was. When I wrote that joke was probably honestly, I don't know, 8 years ago or
Oh
something
damn.
crazy.
Okay.
So, um, a lot of my older jokes were definitely just like, oh, that's a weird idea, somehow came to my mind, and then craft a fake artificial event, which comedians like, I feel like if someone's telling a fake story, it's annoying to me. But if it's clearly fake and it's just silly, then that's okay. You know what I mean? You can't just be
Hmm.
like, yeah, and then this guy came up to me and he punched me. You know, you can't just like make up a story unless there's like an obvious fake joke in it.
Right.
Uh, but no, I probably was just thinking like I wish I knew more specifics, but I feel like people in my friend circle had been like, "Oh, you ever weigh yourself before and after you
Hmm.
poop or whatever, just to see how much your poop weighed or whatever?" Uh, so, so maybe I started with that and then reverse engineered the joke,
Gotcha. Okay.
or I don't know. We're in a culture of kind of diet obsessed people, and
Totally.
you people weigh their food and count their calories and stuff. So
Hmm.
it could have been that too, where I was like, oh, I do the opposite. I weigh my poop, not the food. I don't know,
I'm
but
pretty
that's not.
sure. I think that Tim Ferriss, of like Silicon Valley fame, I'm pretty sure at one point weighed his poop. So in my mind, I was like, shit, dude, he's onto this like deep calorie counting shit. um,
Yeah, well, yeah, that way like you have all the data just in case, right?
well, there's some stuff in this, general realm that I thought I would run by you to see if you're familiar with it. If nothing else, maybe fodder for future stuff. But are you aware of this fecal transplant idea?
Fecal transplant? What are you talking about?
Okay, so I have a buddy who has had some autoimmune issues, and I was aware of
Okay.
this before this guy, but basically, there's this thing where people with autoimmune issues will take encapsulated shit from somebody with a healthy gut to try
Oh my
to
god.
repopulate their gut with healthy
Hmm.
stuff. So
That
like
makes sense. Yeah.
he sort of asked me if I would do it, but I feel like maybe maybe he was aware of some things in my diet that he didn't want to put in his body. But I'm also just like, you're fucking eating shit, dude. Like it doesn't matter if it's in a capsule, but
So you're actually eating it,
yeah, I
or
think
you're
it goes.
swallowing it.
I think you're swallowing it, not. I mean,
Yeah, it's not a medical procedure.
I mean, from what I understand, he's getting encapsulated shit from some like 14-year-old in Oregon, I think. So
That honestly is probably illegal, wouldn't you think?
I don't know. I mean, like, I guess he did sort of seem like he was having to be selective and sort of subtle about it.
Oh my god. That is like if you get in trouble for you're just like it makes sense, but if you get in trouble for like buying a 14-year-old's poop on the internet,
Yeah.
I mean, it could really ruin you.
I mean, I imagine most people would assume that, like, automatically that's some sort of sexual thing, but it's like, no, no,
Oh, for sure.
autoimmune disease, dude.
Oh no, it's just I need better gut flora.
Hmm.
I'm eating a child's poop.
Hmm.
Oh
Um,
man,
there's a
that'd be
similar
something I
one.
would get in trouble for.
There's a
Just
similar
needing
one
them.
for like the gut microbiome tests, and basically, I like to call it the nacho troy test because they will mail you like a thing to ship your poop to them, and you're supposed to do it in a nacho tray or like one of those little paper boats, and then you zip it up in the bag and send it to them, and they analyze it in their lab. But is this also new to you?
Yeah. So, and what like you're just looking for like a spreadsheet of like poop data
I
from
guess
that?
so. Yeah. Like
Yeah, you're like they'll tell you like who you were in a past life or something based off of your poop, or it's just like what it's made up of, or what does it tell you? You think?
I think it's supposed to say like you need more lactobacillus or like whatever like
Uh huh.
strains of probiotics or something like that. But
Yeah, yeah. They're like good color. We love the color. Don't worry about that. Uh, Brown. Yeah, that'd be crazy. Man, I feel bad. I already feel bad for mailmen and UPS drivers, but now they're like, I'm shipping just a hot turd in a box.
hmm I mean, 23andMe like spit, that's one thing, but like shipping
Yeah.
shit, that's another.
Well, I mean, what can Brown do for you? That's UPS's slogan. So they had it coming, I guess.
Oh man. And I guess that's a good segue to I showed you my list of topics.
Yeah, yeah. Well, do you know about the Bristol stool chart?
No.
The Bristol stool chart is it's a medical chart of like of poop, like what is, you
Oh.
know, so they're like, oh, what is your poop like? And they have like, it's like jagged piece, broken
Oof.
pieces with jagged edges, and there's like different weird descriptions. And I used to think that was really funny. I got a poster, bought a poster of it on the internet. There's a show called Getting On, I think it's called,
Hmm.
an older HBO show, and it's like these nurses, and one of the nurses in it is trying to collect stool samples from people that are in the hospital for a side study that she's doing, and everyone's like, stop it, you can't just take poop from all these random whatever. But they talk about the Bristol stool chart and that a lot, and a friend of mine actually made a song inspired by it called the Bristol fart chart. But it's about as goes about as deep as just the title, but it's a good song too.
Is this the same person that did the Randy poops 11 times a day thing?
Yeah, yeah. So the toilet bowl cleaners, if you want to go on Spotify, you can look up the I think it's probably just called the Bristol fart chart, and it rhymes, so it's already better than the stool chart.
Um, Actually, I guess before we get to ejaculate jokes, uh, so this song about Randy poops 11 times a day, and 77 times a week. I felt like it was particularly resonant with me because this like music project that I'm doing, like actually literally last night I was working on this, and there's a 7/11 polyrhythm that equals up to 77. I was like, Randy is essentially shitting my music. So
Yeah. Yeah, that
um,
guy, he has like 40,000 songs on the internet, not
I
just
do.
poop songs. He's got like 70 different bands. They're just him though. And just somehow met him on the internet and started being his friend. He sends me Christmas. I just got his Christmas card. Here, I'll show it to you. I don't know. This is illegal to show his children, but yeah, he's a
Lovely.
nice guy. Um, yeah,
Creative.
I don't know why that song got made. I think a friend of mine told him I pooped 11 times a day and he made that song, but it's not true. I don't poop that many times.
Okay. I didn't know if it was like some sort of preoccupation with like prime numbers or something like that, or
I
um,
think it was just a random thing. Someone, we were like trying to get him to write songs about each other, and we were just throwing him ideas.
well, I suppose with all this like nacho tray encapsulated poop stuff, you can see why I would ask if you actually weighed your poop. But
No, but
it,
I used to have big poops in high school, but now I'm normal.
do you consider poop jokes to be low humor, or do you not judge one way or another?
Oh gosh, I think I feel like in comedy, when you first start out in comedy, you make those type of jokes. You're making poop jokes, sex jokes, because it's like, I don't know, it's instinctual since you were like a kid to make jokes about stuff like that.
Hmm.
And then as you grow as a comedian, maybe you start doing it a little less. But I always felt like if I did it, it was because there was a funny angle, or like I used to pride myself in having like the smartest, dumbest jokes.
Yep. Okay.
Like the subject matter is dumb, but it's clever. And so I don't know, I pride myself in that, to make like grown-ups and old people laugh at like a childish joke, even if they don't want to laugh at it.
Hmm.
uh so I think it definitely can be like, I will look down on my nose probably on certain people who are making certain poop jokes.
Hmm.
But take it from the toilet bowl cleaners. This my friend's band, who
Hmm.
only sings about poop, puke, and pee, and sometimes like boogers and stuff like that. But it's because, and this guy never has said a swear word in his life, so
Interesting.
yeah, he prides himself in that. And but yet he writes all these songs about like really gross poop stuff, because I think it's even kids could laugh at a poop joke,
Hmm.
but not an ejaculate joke. I mean, they can, but uh, maybe it's not as appropriate.
So when does it turn from a swear word to a medical term? Because like does that
Okay.
mean that he'll say poop but not shit? Will he
Yeah,
say
he'll
defecate but not shit?
probably,
Same
yeah.
thing though,
I
right?
think it's just kind of like whatever the consensus of what a swear word is. He just wants to, I don't know. He just took a stand in elementary school when all of his friends started cussing, and he was like, "Not me. I'm going to be different." He likes to be different.
Okay.
Yeah,
I think he's succeeding.
definitely. Yeah,
The, the way that you describe those jokes, though, like the smartest dumb joke, that's totally what I was trying to get at with like you're sort of elevating the poop joke to something that's very
yeah.
clever and yeah, it's good stuff.
I'm like sort of trying to do it less, but I think like if you try to write jokes about certain subject matters, you can succeed. But like I feel like my best jokes just fell into my lap usually because you're just thinking about something or experiencing something or listening to someone else say something, and then you hear it differently, or you just experience that perfect thing. And so for that reason, most of my jokes are about like poop because I like to joke around about poop normally,
Hmm.
or like food. I just love food, not just because it's like creates poop, but because I love to cook, and it's a passion of mine.
Hmm.
So I find that like, oh yeah, you have a lot of jokes about eating.
Metabolism.
Yeah, yeah. And then early on, I would do jokes about like not getting laid and stuff. Because then it's like, oh, it's self-deprecating. That's funny, and then it's on a subject or whatever. But then I started getting laid a lot, and it was very
Yeah,
hard to
man.
write those jokes anymore, from that perspective. And no one wants to hear like a guy just bragging. So
Right, right.
yeah,
Um, man, the whole pineapple thing was fucking hilarious to me. And again, I
oh,
don't need to spoil it for anybody. Look it up. You'll laugh really hard. But uh, same sort of thing with ejaculate jokes. I'm sort of curious if you're aware of, for instance, like the NoFap movement.
no fap movement. I mean, I understand what it means right off the bat, but I don't know if I'm aware of the movement. Is it like huh? Yeah, just people who just choose not to do it.
Well, I partially asked this so I can try to seed the sort of comedy realm with the potential to do jokes about this. Um,
Yeah.
but I mean, basically, the idea is like people who have trouble with like porn and masturbation or whatever will like make the point to not do it, but they get kind of like a little bit crazy,
Oh yeah.
as you might expect. Um, and so if you go to these forums, man, it's fucking weird. It's very funny shit though. But
Oh my
I mean,
god.
like I'm sure that they're struggling with stuff, but like they like think that they have superpowers and like they basically think that they're like God's gift to women once they've hit the 90-day mark or whatever.
Like if they hold it in longer, it's better for the
Yeah,
women.
they think that it's like converted into superpowers basically, and
Oh goodness. Uh-huh. Interesting.
yeah.
That's actually dangerous. Guys who haven't cummed in 90 days thinking that if they get their cum on a woman that it helps them. Gosh, that's actually very dangerous.
I mean, like, yeah, it's weird shit, man. But I guess it comes from this sort of like Eastern school of like Tantra and Taoism and all that. But interesting that you can figure out what it's about, but you haven't seen anybody in that world. They're strange, man.
No, I mean I've been learning, like got like trolls on the internet, like certain types of people, and I forget the term, but it's like a term of people who classify themselves as like never had sex, never will have sex. They just sit in a room and they like torture people or something. I feel like there's some sort of term that I'm like, what is that?
Like
But
incels,
yeah, maybe what's that mean? What's
like
the incel?
involuntary celibate.
Yeah, I think that's what it is. And I think supposedly there's a bunch that exists. I don't know. I was watching a QAnon documentary and I was like, what? What are they talking about? I had never heard of this. And it's just like guys who are like, I am angry and I will never have sex. I'm just going to torture everyone around me. So I feel like the no fap thing, even if that's not why they're doing it,
Hmm.
it's still, they got some sort of chemical imbalance probably because of it.
Yeah, it seems pretty adjacent to that world. Um, another thing that I'd ask you about in this sort of realm is like sort of like this weird occult stuff with like Aleister Crowley and like people who might like eat their cum.
Oh, I haven't heard of any of that. I have heard people say, "Oh, come on, you've never tasted yours or whatever." But and and uh and I'm like, "No, I haven't." But so there's like a occult thing where they eat their cum and it also gives them powers.
I think so, yeah. Like, and I think maybe in this Crowley thing they like bake it into a cake called a cake of light. I might be making this up, in which case, shame on me for having this in my mind. But I'm pretty sure it's a real thing.
Dang. Well, I remember there was, oh my God, what a horrible story. I think it was in LA too. A teacher got in trouble for baking his cum into a bunch of cookies and giving them to all the kids in his high school.
Oh yeah,
And
man,
like,
that's rough.
yeah, like all these kids were like, I did what? Yeah. And he was like on the news. Gosh, that's just horrible.
Yeah, that's
Um,
insane.
I mean, yeah, interesting. Bake it into stuff. Yeah,
I suppose,
why
yeah,
not, I
egg
guess.
replacer or something, right?
Yeah, I mean, listen, people eat cum for sure, but it's usually like a sexual act, I would think,
Mm-hmm.
not like a part of a daily routine, unless you're having that sexual act daily, which I think would get old at a certain point. You know, you got to
Yeah.
keep it fresh.
Yeesh. And okay, I guess the last one in this sort of realm is, and you have to be aware of this, is urine therapy.
Urine therapy, I love it. I mean, that's already a great name
Yeah,
for
like
a
urine
therapy place.
town.
Urine, yeah. Urine therapy. So it's either people drinking their urine, bathing in their urine, or doing some sort of therapy that improves their urine. Maybe the first one. You know what I mean?
I
They're
think
like, "Oh, my urine's weak, man. How do I get this more urine-y?" And then they do like some sort of therapy cleanse.
I think that's the idea. Yeah, like there's supposed to be some sort of way that you like, have this like closed ecology of your own self nutrition or whatever. But yeah, I mean, like I come from Tacoma, Washington, and there's a health food store there called Marlene's, and the Marlene was known for drinking her own pee, and
Oh,
I don't know
interesting.
that it is bad for you, but it doesn't seem like anything normal people do. But I also, in asking you all this, I feel like I'm the creep that has spent too much time doing anthropology on the internet.
No, I love it. I think they're great topics. I mean, like, yeah, I'm not familiar. Like, I don't know what your listeners are used to hearing. So I'm also like not trying to be the most craziest person on this podcast. Like, I don't think you like the musicians that you have on the podcast. You're not probably asking them about eating their cum.
No,
No. So yeah, I'll just try to say but I don't want to be psychotic in my answers.
of course.
Urine therapy. You know, there was you ever watch that Nathan For You show? Nathan Fielder.
I just watched an episode of his new thing, but I haven't seen Nathan For You.
Yeah. There's an episode of that show where he's like talking to this guy who owns a gas station in Glendale, I think.
Okay.
And it's an older guy. And then out of the blue, it has nothing to do with the episode. Out of the blue, the guy starts talking about how he drinks a child's urine.
Ooh.
And he goes, "Wait, what?" And he goes, "Yeah." And he's like, "Wait, you drink?" He's like, "Yeah." And he's like, "Not." He got all annoyed when he's like, "So you would drink my urine?" And he goes, "Not a grown up, a child." He goes, "Like my nephew, it's like pure, it's better for you." And he's like, "What?" And then it was just kind of like the guy was like, "Yeah." And he's like, "Why?" And he goes, "Well, my dad did it, and so now I do it." And we were like, "Oh, I think he's just confused." Like his dad told him something, but no, I didn't know that that was like a thing that people really do.
Yeah, I think it's like for the sort of like like breatharian sort of off the deep end type of health food people. But
Yeah.
yeah. Anyway,
Oh God.
it's funny. You're the second comedy oriented person that's been on the podcast. The other one is Ross Bryant, and we
Okay.
talked more about
Yeah.
like improvisation. But I guess I'm curious. So you do stand up stuff, but do you? I mean, like, do you do improvisation stuff at all? And I hate saying improv, but is that like part
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
your scene at all?
I've never done like structured improv or taken a class. I think I would like to now. I think when I first started comedy, it was just too scary, and I think I'm more comfortable with like who I am as a performer and like the tools that I've created, and I would feel too off the deep end, I think, initially to do that. But I used to do there was a show in town. It still exists actually, but it's at a different theater now called the Tomorrow Show. And it was every Saturday at midnight, like a comedy variety show. And me and my friend Davey Johnson, we would always interrupt the show at some point during it every week for like 5 or 6 years. And the bits were always like heavily improvised. You know, we would come up with maybe a beginning and an end and come up with a few beats.
Hmm.
But for a lot of it, it was kind of my first experiences with improvising and even acting, really, because before that it was just straight like, delivery of jokes and stuff. Um, and I find that when I'm performing stand up, like the best that I feel is when I'm improvising.
Okay, interesting.
Um, like in a long set, I would love it if like 15 minutes of it just materializes because I'm on stage interacting with people in that room. You know what I mean? Even though it's like, yeah, you can't put that on TV, but stand-ups, to me, it's created for the room that you're in.
Right.
Otherwise, and if it translates to TV, then that's good for someone in a suit. But you need to be funny. You can't just do the same joke the same way. It took me a long time to realize that, because I would I would try to do the same joke the same way and be like, it's not working tonight, and it's because you're not being like real with the moment. So being able to
Hmm.
improvise um, is a bit, it's more authentic. And
Hmm.
then if you can slide your jokes into those moments, or if you have a joke you weren't planning on doing, but something happens in the room where you're improvising and you're like, oh, I get to do this joke and act like I just came up with it. So there's a lot of strength in being completely in the moment and going with that flow. And acting, I've improvised in acting scenes and stuff, auditions and stuff, where you're like, you either kind of come up with something else that they wrote, or you're with another actor that's improvising, so you have to just be in the moment listening and rolling with it. But no, I've never done structured improv. I think it would be fun at this point, but you would
Hmm.
have to have a lot of trust in the people around you.
I did get a sense that your stuff is like prepared in advance. Like I feel like you seem more like a composer than like a jazz musician who's like improvising. And like that's the way I
Yeah.
am too. And so I'm curious, like if you weren't able to try things in front of the audience, um, do you feel like, I mean, like would that be like a big issue if you had to like if you only get one chance to try the joke in front of the audience and you have to come up with it all in advance? Does that mean that it's going to
Oh
be
yeah.
not as good?
No, yeah, you need the audience. It's kind of tough because sometimes you come up with a joke and you go, "Oh yeah, that's going to work no matter what," and it does, and it always works. And you just go, "I got the next great thing for my act." But for the most part, you kind of don't know. It made you laugh, but it's also very energy dependent. And so like a really good joke doesn't need the energy attached to it, whereas something that is, takes acting and writing, um, you have to you have to let the audience tell you if it's good or not, basically.
Mm,
And that's really hard because every audience is different, and every town you go to is different, and every room in LA is different.
right.
And it's tough, but so you have to kind of be like, I have this new joke, I want to try it. And if it sort of gets a laugh, you keep trying it and adjusting it, and it takes doing it in 20, 50 places until you're like, this joke works everywhere, and now it's ready for something. Like when I
Mm,
did one of my TV sets, it was a weird contrived bit, wasn't necessarily punchline type of joke, but I had to be able to do it on late night TV. I had to do it because it had to be 5 minutes and it
mm,
had to be, whatever. So I had to do it in every room I could for like a month and be like, it worked. It worked at the dog food store. I don't know why they were doing a show there, but they were. It worked at the comedy club. It worked at the comic book store. It worked at the open mic. It worked at, a theater.
mhm.
So yeah, you really do need the audience to tell you if it's funny, because there's so many things that I'm like, this is the thing that I think is funny, and no one ever laughs at it, but I still keep bringing it, and I'll be like, okay, I'll put a funny joke on either side of it, so that way I can coast through the thing that I think is funny, and then maybe one night people will really dig it, and I'll be
Mhm.
like, yeah, these are the people that I like. But yeah, you have to start off by just making yourself laugh, and then to not hate yourself every night, you have to adjust based off of what everyone thinks is funny, because what is funny, is objective. It's up to the people, but it also is up to the culture, and it's up to, it changes every single day, and it
Right.
keeps changing, so uh you have to keep testing if it's funny in this current day, or yeah.
So interesting. So like, do you feel like there is any potential for a universal, timeless joke that, like, I mean, without workshopping it, I mean, could there be a joke that is universally and timelessly funny? This is like
I
a
think so.
philosophical sort of weird question.
Yeah, I mean, I think the jokes that continue to be funny, for me, there's jokes that I'll think are funny always, or like if you watch an old thing and it still makes you laugh. I think physical comedy, type, silent film type comedy, I think is funny. Doesn't matter what language you speak, as long as it's not too cultural, as long as it's more like, relationship, or yeah, I think there's some really primitive things that will always be funny. And if you can write a joke that kind of taps into those, maybe,
Mhm.
I think I have a lot of stupid wordplay jokes, and I think if you like, some people might just go, no, that's not funny, but I think there's obvious comedy in certain things that will never go away,
Mhm.
where you could go, oh, okay, I at least get why that's funny. But then there's things where you listen to older comedy and you're like, wait, this was what was popular, kind of trends, or whatever. It's like, I don't think this is funny at all. um but yeah, I hope maybe my one of my jokes will be funny forever. I don't know. Yeah, not a joke about like a Blackberry. That one wouldn't last, or like the phone
A
Blackberry, not the
Blackberry. Oh,
berry.
gotcha. I mean, dude, I've
Yeah.
been waiting for a joke about a Blackberry, like, and a blueberry
Oh,
too.
I love a Blackberry. I knew a guy that would do a blueberry joke, but not a Blackberry.
Um, actually, this is kind of funny about blueberries. So my wife does like, like visual stuff. Like she's a Photoshop wizard, female wizard. But she was looking through
She's a
gigs
witch.
online. Say what?
She's a Photoshop witch.
Yes, your words. But she was on Craigslist and she came across this thing where somebody was offering to pay for somebody to do a some sort of blueberry fetish, and
Oh,
so there's some sort of blueberry fetishism out there. Which again, this is outing me as some sort of crazy anthropologist of the internet, but just thought it was worth mentioning that.
a blueberry fetish. Yeah, I mean, it's probably all out there, right? That's
hmm
interesting. Like, do you remember what it was? Like they like to eat them, or they like to have a bunch of them, or they dressed like a blueberry.
Okay, I guess the source is actually from something having to do with Willy Wonka, and I think like
Oh
the
yeah.
whole like Veruca Salt, or that's
Yeah,
the
Violet,
blueberry
you're
one,
turning
right?
violet, Violet. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think that's maybe the origin, and there were like people debating it. It's like, no, it can't be this way because it has to be like this, and very opinionated people about blueberry fetishism. So, uh,
The kid in my elementary school he was like a pretty big guy, and he wore blue sweatpants and sweatshirt for Halloween, and he was a blueberry. Yeah. Everyone
nice.
was like, oh.
It's unfortunate for him. Okay, so
Yeah.
in terms of like the mechanics and sort of like that type of stuff with comedy, like I do music. I'm like I compose stuff, and like that's sort of like coming up with a joke. But I feel like a joke has to have a certain timing and punchline, like a delivery that works out. And in music, you don't necessarily have to have that same trajectory. So
Mhm.
what do you think about like punchlines and setups and like the sort of mechanism of that? Like, is there any sort of guiding principle in your head when thinking about that?
Yeah, it's tough because like everybody has their own different way of doing stand up.
hmm
writing short jokes, there's devices within those short jokes that make them jokes and
Mhm.
not jokes, and there's things that make them more powerful and more pungent and more effective. um, but for me, what I've been trying to do lately is, like, jokes come to me based off of things I'm experiencing and thinking, and I'll write those jokes down. But then if you compile all those short jokes, if you're not really like, if you have oh, I just wrote this funny joke about the moon, let's say I did that. If you just are like, oh, how's it going? And then you just tell a joke about the moon, it seems a little bit weird. And
Mhm.
people aren't in the right mindset unless it's like really bizarre or really perfect. And I feel like I used to try to do that a lot and it would sort of work. But I think what I'm trying to do now is, once I compile enough stuff and I'm talking about the moon, I can sort of get laughs just on a fun conversation that has some different, oh, I never thought of that. That's funny. Ha ha ha. And then you hit them with a very clear joke or punchline, either near the end, or if you have a couple of them, you can start stacking them up. But I've noticed where I'm like, oh, that's the funniest sentence in the world. No one will laugh at it unless I have something else to say on the topic.
Mhm.
So for me, it's like a punchline and a clear cut joke is still really powerful. Um, some people just tell these big long winded stories, which is not really my style. I wish I could, because then I'd have tons of material. But I feel like the longer I'm writing and doing stand up as the person that I am, the more I'm compiling. Oh, look at these kind of themes that are appearing, and oh, this one doesn't really have anything with it yet, and um, but yeah, it's kind of just like create whatever is coming to you and put it on paper and then sort it later. And
Gotcha.
there's things that won't make the cut, there's things that fit together perfectly, there's things that I'm like, okay, we're going to take just a bit of a detour because this thing always will work and it doesn't have anything to do with anything I'm saying. And I think in music sometimes it can be that way too, where it's like, oh, I just came up with this little thing, it's kind of cool, and then you build from there, or you hold it and put it somewhere else. But I've been like, I've written on shows and stuff where they're like, okay, we need this many this type of jokes and this many, think about this topic, and you're like, it's pretty tough to do that. You do end up with some stuff after that,
Mhm.
but there, you know what I mean? Like I feel like the creative flow of what naturally comes to your sharp mind is going to
Mhm.
be the most potently you, at least, unless you're
For
just
sure.
like a joke writing whiz, which people, there's people who write monologue jokes on late night shows and that's all they do is, it's like, a bit of a distraction and a surprise at the end, or this and this, and then the least expected thing happens. You set them up for something that you think is going to happen and then it doesn't. uh, there's all these little tricks, and if you're writing it from that angle, um, yeah, you'll still have jokes, I guess. So I don't know. I don't think I answered a question in there.
Uh, uh, I forgot what the question was.
Yeah, yeah,
So I guess like that's interesting, having to write for a specific duration or like a specific structure of joke or type of joke, and like I guess right now I'm working on like a 30-minute EP for a project, and so it's like similar to you maybe doing like a half hour of comedy. I'm curious how you like cultivate a routine that's like a specific time like that, whether it's 5 minutes or 30 minutes.
yeah.
Like, do you see it as like I have this many chapters, and like, or how do you think about pacing it, um yeah, and constructing that?
Yeah, in the past, you just kind of are like, you take the opportunities that you're given. So you start with a 5 minute set, and then you kind of just keep upgrade. People will start asking you to do more and more time. So you just use the foundation that you build, and then you just keep sort of adding to that and discarding and changing. And so it kind of just builds very naturally. And then you're like, oh gosh, I got to do 45 minutes, and I can do this 10-minute set that I usually do, and then I'll put this thing here, and then it kind of same thing with the audience. It sort of takes having to do it a bunch of times to to know if it's good, because a 45-minute set is much different than a 10-minute set. And even if you take 4 different 10-minute sets and sandwich them together, you find out by minute 30 the audience doesn't care about you anymore and
Right.
you're losing them. So then you're like, oh, I do have to change things that I normally wouldn't have to change. Um, yeah, but I think same thing as what I was saying before is like I just have to throw down every idea I have, and even if it's just barely a part of something, it might really serve me later.
Hmm.
Because it's like, oh, that was like the perfect, tag to a joke I hadn't written yet somehow. Um, but yeah, for like a TV set where they're like, you have 5 minutes to do on late night. Um, it's up to every comedian's a little different. What I would do is say, what are the biggest laughs that I've been getting? And then maybe it's these 3 things. Can I do all 3 of those in the same set? Or would that be too weird?
Hmm.
So it's kind of like, well, this joke usually comes with these 2 jokes. So I'll open with that. And you have to think about the closer. Yeah, you have to kind of think about what's the first thing I'm going to say that gets people on board with me, and they go, oh, I get this guy, that made me laugh and I understand him, because you have such a short amount of time to get to know them.
Hmm.
And then you have to be like, what's the joke that will kill the hardest at the end?
Hmm.
Doesn't always work out that way, but you do have to kind of like allow the audience to take little breaks. You have to bring them down to go back up. You can't always just be psychotically laughing, especially for a long set.
Hmm.
um, But yeah, I would think like, okay, I don't want to leave one side of my set too weak. If I have some stuff that is a little weak, you want to make sure you have strong stuff on either side of it. And you also have to think about, am I lying a lot in this set? If I am, you know what I mean? Like if these jokes are made up, are they going to affect the next joke? Did I talk about this topic too much and now it doesn't chewed bubble gum, the flavor's gone, it's not as funny anymore because I'm not shocked? Or you just said you were single, now you have a girlfriend, like that type of stuff. So you have to kind of move stuff around so you don't contradict yourself. Um, and yeah, there's a lot of like technical stuff that you
Hmm.
don't realize until you do it, and then you go, oh shit, I really shot myself in the foot there. Next time I have to move that there. And it's just all about repetition, really.
Gotcha. With the sort
Yeah.
of like under the hood mechanics of it and stuff, I feel like a lot of people I've asked about this type of stuff, I feel like they don't want to talk about it, and maybe it's that they don't want to reveal their secret sauce or whatever. Do you feel like people in your, like community of comedians, do they talk about the mechanics, or is it like kind of like shop talk where it's like, oh yeah, this thing, or are there people that have some grand scheme of like an elegant algorithm of comedy or something like that?
Yeah, I feel like comedians like to talk about it when they're getting started. Um, because it's kind of like going to class. It's like the more you use that tool and the more you talk about it, the sharper it gets. And it's exciting, you're like
Mhm.
proud of yourself and you think it's cool, and when you talk to someone else and you're like, oh my god, I do that too. But I've learned stuff from other comedians where I'm like, oh, like, especially when I was first starting out, they're like, why don't you move that part to the end, why do you say that first? And you're like, oh, you're right. And then that becomes something you remember when you're writing another joke or trying another thing. But I think the longer you do comedy, you start to not want to talk about it because you've already talked it to death so many times. And like a new comic will come up and want to talk shop, and you're like, oh my god, I just don't even know if I like comedy at this point. And you want advice, and I don't have any. And I'm kind of in that first phase again where I took such a break that comedy is exciting again. And
Nice.
but I definitely went through a phase where I was just like, kill me. Like, I don't want to talk about comedy. I don't even want to be funny in a conversation. You start to put all your value into this one little, like, pet trick, basically. And you're just like, I'm multidimensional. I'm this, I'm that. But
Yeah.
uh, I think uh, some comedians like to play it too cool. You know what I mean? Like comedians, it's not just that they're annoyed, it's just that like, oh, I don't work hard at this and I'm always good. And I don't write. I just come up with stuff, right, and kind of have a plan when I go on stage, but I don't work hard at this, it's effortless. And
Mm-hmm.
people start to think that they're too cool for the process that actually creates comedy. And it's like, no, you're a writer. You're not Mr. Cool, like jean jacket bro. You're you know what I mean? Like
Mm-hmm.
you're a nerd who writes basically little tiny poems, and you go on stage and you perform. You know what I mean? You're a clown. You don't have to act like you're too cool.
Yeah, I mean that's like the person who's like, I aced the test without studying for it. It's like, who gives a fuck, man?
Yeah. It's like a power, like I'm better than you thing.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, comedians do like to talk about comedy for the most part, but you get burnt out because you spend so many hours in a room watching people do stand up and hearing your own jokes a bunch of times and hearing other people's jokes a bunch of times that you start to just be like, this is all formula. It's not exciting anymore. Why would I want to, like, I'm not at the comedy show. I don't want to talk about it anymore. But I think to be progressing, you do have to be talking about it. Once I stopped really wanting to dive in is when I stopped caring and I stopped really wanting to perform, you know.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. So, in terms of like, I guess dick jokes, I'm very amused by, subtle segue there. But uh, like the same little clip that I've been talking about, with your little answering machine thing, and like I saw some funny animations of you blow drying your butt with a very long penis dangling. And the only other person who gives me dick humor that I like at this level is JB Smoove and his whole like spiel about ligaments. I don't know if you've seen that, but I will
I
watch
haven't.
that once a week for the rest of my life.
That's so funny.
But there's something funny about men and their relationship with their genitalia, and I can't
Yeah.
pinpoint what it is, but I feel like maybe you have insight.
Yeah, I feel like, I mean, rule number one for comedy is like, for the most part, you have to be likable. That would be
Okay.
my biggest, that's like, that'll fast forward you to doing well. If you're likable, people will want to listen to you talk. And, some people are likable by being abrasive or are likable by being an asshole. You laugh at the guy who's an asshole. As long as it's still someone that you like. So
Hmm.
if you can talk about your dick and have people still want to, you know what I mean? Like, I feel like for me and for each person, it's different. Like, what's a likable way for me? The way I look, my energy. So it's
Hmm.
like, I feel like I can't just go out and talk about like how awesome it is. Just as long as it's not straightforward. I don't know. Maybe that would work because that's kind of funny. Um, yeah, I definitely have seen people try all sorts of dick jokes and they're not endearing. They're not, it's awkward, maybe
Hmm.
there's a confidence thing in it. Open mic comics, yeah, as I said, it's like a topic that you want to talk about because it's you're first starting, and that's like the easiest joke to get maybe.
Hmm.
But yeah, I guess I really did end up talking about my dick quite a bit. But it was always like a figurative dick, I would say.
Hmm.
It was never like, I never picture. I feel like when I would make jokes that were inappropriate, like sexually inappropriate, it was all like, because these words will get a laugh coming from me.
Hmm.
It was never like, oh man, this crazy thing happened to my dick. Uh, uh, yeah, and then whatever you get, comedy gets labeled as like, oh god, another, blah blah
Hmm.
blah. Just like you were saying, you don't really want to hear. Maybe you wouldn't classify yourself as someone who is a big fan of dick jokes, but there
Hmm.
still are some out there that are going to make you laugh because it's not really about the subject matter. It's about each comedian is different. Just like, I mean, musicians, I'm sure there's a bunch of musicians that have sang a song about a butterfly, and you know
Hmm.
one you might like, "You're My Butterfly Sugar Baby," that song, and
Yeah,
one you might not like. I guess I could have saved that one for the one you didn't like.
that would be a lie.
Yeah. I guess subject matter, because it's really just how the artist packages it, and if they're making fun of the fact that they're talking about a dick, or if they're uh, doing the same thing that an asshole comedian would do, but doing it uh, completely from a different point of view is kind of funny. I
Mhm.
don't know. Yeah, I think there's room. You can joke about whatever you want as long as it's not like hurting people, and as long as it's not as long as it's funny. You know, I mean, the whole thing is like funny is funny. It's like, yeah, that's true, but there's also like we need progress. We need to be moving forward. We don't need to be
Right.
doing things that are harmful to society. Uh, so if you're talking about your dick and it's harmful to society, then I'm against it. That's what I was gonna
Gotcha.
say.
Okay. Yeah, JB Smoove talking about his dick, I feel like is beneficial for everybody because it's hilarious. So in some of your stuff, I by no means would call it prop comedy, but like I feel like occasionally you will come prepared with something that supplements your routine, and it's fucking
Oh yeah.
funny. And so like I I'm curious like how that came about and how you would describe it. Like it does that make sense to you? What I'm saying at all? Like
Yeah.
okay.
Oh yeah. No, I used to feel like a total fool traveling the country because I was like, okay, I have this, you know, if I didn't pack everything, I couldn't do my act. And it kind of made me feel like a prop comic, even though I didn't identify as one.
Hmm.
Um, and the more I look back on the comedy that I've done in my career, those are the bits that make me the happiest. Because no, you know, if I come up, everyone can go up there and just talk into a microphone. That's kind of the only rule. You can do a lot of stuff outside of that.
Hmm.
That and less and less people do, you know, conceptual things using. Oh, I got, you know, even if it's just a notebook, you're showing stuff in a notebook, or you know, taking a phone call during your set, or anything that makes it feel a little different, to me adds value.
Hmm.
Because there are no real rules to stand-up comedy, but most people do fall into the one lane, and a lot of that's industry wants to make money off of you, and if it's easy to define you without seeing you, then then that's better for them. But uh yeah, I would carry around a fake wedding ring. I would carry around I'd have two cell phones on me at all times. Uh, I always had to make sure. I was like, okay, you're going on stage. Is the fake phone in your left pocket and the real phone in your right? Do you have the wedding ring in your back pocket? Do you have your iPad? Do you have your notebook? Do you have, you know,
Hmm.
did you give the sound cue to the guy in the back? Do you have this ready? Do you have the plant in the audience that you're gonna act like as a normal audience member, but as a shill? Um, I think all that stuff messes with the reality,
Hmm.
uh, and especially when you're doing a long set, those are really valuable to reset the audience. Where you're like, here's 10 minutes of jokes, and then something kind of blindsides you, and then you're ready
Yep.
for another 10 minutes of jokes. You know, so I don't think there's any shame in using props. I always thought when I was a kid, especially like Carrot Top, you know, the king of prop comedy. That stuff, and Gallagher. Gallagher was big time prop comedy. He smashed watermelons. That guy.
I don't know
Um,
Gallagher.
you don't know Gallagher? Oh my gosh, he used to smash watermelons on stage, and he's ridiculous, and he's an asshole, and whatever. But if you go back and watch his old specials, it was always like inventions. You know, oh, I invented this to solve a problem,
Hmm.
and people will shit on that, but it's because they don't do inventions, you know. So like, I don't do that, so it's stupid. But
Hmm.
I think a prop is hilarious. I don't mind it, even though it's not necessarily exactly what I do. I
Hmm.
don't mind it at all.
I heard the little spiel that you gave about the pace picante thing, and like in my mind, that's the same thing. Where it's like there are technologies around now that you can utilize in hilarious ways, and I don't think that people are, but I appreciate that you are. Where it's like making fake Twitter accounts, like that type of shit. So like,
Yeah.
yeah.
It all moves it forward. Not that that's the intention of it,
Hmm.
but to me, it's like you're gonna have an easier time creating the funniest joke in a realm if you're the only one creating jokes in that realm. So
Hmm.
it may take a different type of brain to be like, okay, you know, to me, you're talking about the Twitter pranks or whatever. It's like, yeah, people didn't used to do phone pranks either. And then someone did it and they were like, what the heck?
Hmm.
So it's like there's all these different avenues for us to joke around, and it's not just what you would assume. There is some like I feel like I was doing all sorts of lying on the internet, and now like the internet is filled with lies and it's screwed with society. But
Yeah.
I pretty early on exposed that you could just make people believe something that wasn't true, but I did it for funny jokes, not to ruin society. So
Yeah.
um, maybe it was an early indicator that we needed to create some sort of boundaries on the internet.
That's a great way to describe it. I was lying on the internet for a while.
Yeah, we found out I used to do a podcast and we would just lie. And people would go, "Is that true?" And we would be like, "Yeah, Jack Black is on the podcast today," and it would just be our friend. And we just thought it was so funny to make people believe something that wasn't true at all,
Hmm.
but for the reason of comedy. you
Hmm.
know, but it was just way too easy to make a group of people believe something. You know,
Hmm.
uh,
The whole like scheming thing to like have a long con that like involves like like I feel like for me I would just get too overwhelmed with the hilarity of it and then reveal it too early, and so like the ability to like do the long con and like follow through with a sense of self-control, like that's great. I couldn't do
yeah,
it.
it takes a lot of luck too. It takes a lot of luck, but it also takes like being okay with whatever the outcome is.
Hmm.
And I used to be a really impatient person when I was younger. I would like call my friend and be like, "You want to go to the movies today?" And they'd be like, "No, I can hang out tomorrow." And I'd be like, "I don't want to hang out tomorrow. Forget it." And then the next day would roll around and I'd be like, "I should have said yes. We would be hanging out right now." Like I was like so impatient, man. And I think I'm much better at just going with the flow and planting seeds and letting them grow. And if one thing turns into something great, then awesome. If something doesn't, then you don't need to be stressed about it. So I think those I feel like the creating fake Twitter accounts in the past, the thing that I did with Pace Picante, that was, to me, even if it didn't turn into anything, I could still tell someone, yeah, I ran this account. It
Hmm.
was kind of character building where they go, "You're the weirdest person in the world," and I'd be like, "That's what I need people to think for me to get stuff in comedy."
Hmm.
So uh,
Interesting.
yeah, as long as something doesn't take too much of your energy for no payoff and you won't
Hmm.
regret it, I think you may as well plant seeds. Let them, we live in a 10-second video world where that's the only thing that's pleasing, but something larger is definitely going to have more value as long as it hits.
Hmm. Interesting. Um, I'm curious if you've I don't know if you're familiar with like GPT-3, but like the sort of like text-based AI thing that will generate whatever the fuck you want. Like you could
Um,
just be like stand-up routine between Jerry Seinfeld and this is a real thing, Jerry Seinfeld and Eddie Murphy, I think, and it generates this like somewhat believable stand-up. If you haven't heard of it, I want to just put that in your
wow,
head so
yeah,
that you
I'll have
can
to check
surf
it
it in.
out.
Um, if you go to AI Dungeon, I think it's meant for people who are playing like nerd games or whatever, but I think you can basically train it up to say whatever you want. So I'd be
Whoa.
curious where your mind would go with that.
Yeah, that would be fun to take a look at. It also
It's
might just really creep me out though.
yeah, comedy in the age of AI.
Yeah.
Um, okay, so I guess the last thing I'll ask you about is your Randy wants to try marijuana thing, and that's another sort of like grand scheme it seems. And so I'm curious how you went about conceiving of that, and then like bringing it into being, and
Yeah.
all that.
Uh, well, the original I was writing on a pilot for Comedy Central, and the reason I was writing on it is because the show was all about coming up with really weird, kind of social. I did a lot of weird kind of not pranks, but like things that messed with society and how would this work? And so the show was you had to come up with a lot of weird out of the box ideas, and one of them that I came up with was like, what if we had a weed festival in the Colorado corner of four corners, Utah, New Mexico, Arizona, Colorado. At that point, it was the only place where it was recreationally legal.
Mm.
2 of the states it was medical, and Utah it was illegal. And I was like, that'd be funny. We just like showed up and like, had like 50 people in tie-dye shirts and had like a weed festival. To me, it just highlighted how ridiculous like the laws are, where it's like, really, there's crazy amount of imaginary lines here, and if I step over there I get arrested. Like, to me, it just really exposed how silly all these
Mm-hmm.
different laws that we have on different things. um, and no one in the room liked it. I wrote it for this
Interesting.
show, and they were like, nope, next. And I was like, fuck you guys. Like, I'm gonna. So I kept it in my notes, and then I had never smoked weed. I was in my early 30s and I really never had. And I'd kind of come to the realization that I wanted to. And I was like, but this is weird. I never have. I have to make it into something. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I'm, as an entity, as a comedian, I may as well, even if it's just a little video. And then I used that idea. I was like, what if the first time I smoked weed was in the corner of the Colorado Four Corners? That'll be the first time. And now I have this opportunity to curate my very first experience. How many people get that? A lot of people smoke weed. Also, who cares? I found that out a lot. A lot of people were like, who cares, man? But to me, it was special.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I get a chance to, create the song that I smoke to. I get a chance to do it exactly where I want, to learn as much as I can. We live in a world full of knowledge that we didn't have 20 years ago about weed. We live in a world full of products we didn't have 20 years ago. Like,
Yep.
I just kind of was like, this is a really special opportunity for me to have the best first experience ever. So it kind of was just built around that. And I
Mm-hmm.
found a filmmaker who I had never met until we started meeting about this. And now he's a good friend of mine, Johnny Look. Great director and filmmaker. And yeah, it was just me, him, and a sound guy went to Colorado, and those guys didn't really smoke weed. So I was really kind of on my own learning. I didn't have like a sensei or anything. The limo driver knew more about weed. So he was like trying to tell me how to smoke. And all my extra weed before we flew out, I gave to the limo driver.
Nice.
Um, but yeah, it kind of just came from like, yeah, actually being forced to come up with weird ideas. So sometimes that stuff does work. You go, oh shoot, look at that. Um, and then just waiting for the right things to align. And even though it wasn't like I didn't make any money off of it, it was just like a fun thing
Mm-hmm.
that a lot of people have seen at this point. It's on Funny or Die. I think it has close to 1 million views at this point. And every 420, I get to tell people about it again. So it's kind
Mm-hmm.
of perfect to, yeah. And I'm wearing a tie dye shirt right now, so as you can see, it definitely had an effect on me.
I think that was the first thing I saw of yours, and yeah, it was. I was very pleasantly surprised by how funny it was because,
Yeah.
as I said, I was expecting you to be a dud.
If it wasn't for Johnny Look, the director, it would have not been that good. He put a lot of work into it, and I had very little experience telling such a full story and doing the things you had to do. I had gags and ideas and jokes, but I was just kind of like, let's film it. It'll turn into something. And he's like, no, we have to kind of figure it out. So I definitely am thankful to have such a talented person working on it with me.
Nice.
But yeah, just watch it, everybody. It's on Funny or Die. It's probably on YouTube as well. And
Mm-hmm.
Randy wants to try marijuana. Uh,
How did you
anything I
go
should
about
say about
finding your? I forget if there were one or two, but you had like a doppelganger essentially, and I mean, shit, I shouldn't have spoiled it, but
Oh no.
how do you go about finding
Yeah.
your doppelganger? Just like
We were in
Craigslist?
Denver. No, they're both stand-up comedians, those guys.
Interesting.
Um,
Okay.
and we were in Denver and kind of just through the chain of other comedians put a word out saying, hey, does anybody know any redheaded guys with beards? And those are the two that surfaced. And both of them are really funny comics. And actually, uh, that's the first time I ever met them. One of them, this guy Zeke, every time I would tell more about my story, he would be like, that's like me too. We almost brought him with us to Four Corners and had him hang out with us. We thought it'd just be funny. But the other guy, William Montgomery, I was up I'm actually going to Humboldt this weekend to do stand up, but I was up there maybe 4 months ago and doing a show randomly with another comic. And it was one of those guys, William Montgomery.
Nice.
And he's like, hey man, we met on that weed thing. And I was like, that's crazy. And he's super funny. He lives in
Uh,
Austin now. And when I was out in Austin, hung out with him a bunch. And yeah, but like so many years of being like, I don't remember that guy that well. And now we're friends. And it's weird to think that he was the guy that's in the weed doc. Yeah, so both comedians, Zeke, crap, I can't think of his last name right now, but I think he might live in Humboldt now, even though he was
okay.
in Denver. Yeah, both of them at this festival that I did in Humboldt. Zeke and that guy, both redheaded guys with beards, were in there.
Shit was funny, dude. If you had actually tried weed beforehand, and you still did the whole thing, do you feel like it would have not been funny, or like do you feel like you had to have that genuine sort of authentic
I
first
yeah
time?
yeah I wouldn't want to do it otherwise, but I have had a lot of people go, wait, really? You had never smoked? I thought you were just fucking around. I was like, why would I put so much effort into something if I was just lying? So I have found out that a lot of people just thought it was for a gag.
Interesting.
Um, but I wouldn't have. To me, that's what made it so powerful. The reason I wanted to do it, because I guess most people didn't. Yeah, your first time smoking weed, who cares? But for me, it's like, well, I avoided it for a long time for all sorts of reasons. So this is a big, I'm an adult and now I'm going to do this like thing that most people did when they were 14.
Hmm.
Um, so maybe not, maybe it would still be as valuable, but I think uh, I wouldn't want to put that much energy into it if I was being inauthentic.
Hmm. I
Yeah.
remember when I was talking to you and you're like, yeah, actually just did it like recently, and actually I made a film about it. I was like, what the fuck? But yeah, like I mean, just hearing that, like, part of me wouldn't want to believe it, but then I went home and it was real. So
Yeah, yeah. Oh, it was fun. Yeah. I was hoping I would like it. I was a little worried that it might not agree with me, but I did want it in my life. Like the medicinal aspects of it sounded very appealing to me.
hmm.
Um, yeah, and here I am. I don't know how many years later. I have a bad sense of time now since I started smoking weed, but I now know a lot about weed.
Hmm.
And last year, I even grew my own
Oh
weed.
shit! How did it go?
Yeah, really good. It's all really good. And
Beautiful.
yeah, I grew. I'd spent 2 years learning. The first year was kind of tinkering, and the stuff didn't turn out that great. And then the next year, I used better genetics and outdoor and in pots, and ended up very successfully growing weed that I really enjoy.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
What strain?
Oh, a handful. My favorite is let's see. Well, there's a joint. It's the one that I've been really enjoying is a Durban Poison cross. It's an orange Durban crossed with a Durban Poison, so it's basically a Durban Poison, which is a sativa. The breeder is a company up in Mendocino,
Okay.
and they're right near Humboldt. And I'm doing shows in Eureka, California, and Humboldt this weekend, and the guy who owns the breeding company is going to come watch the shows.
Awesome.
So yeah, and it's literally my favorite. It's called 2020 Mendocino is the company, and they sell seeds basically.
Nice.
And their all their strains are really good. I grew two of their strains, and this one is their other one is really good too, but this one is a daytime. I like a more sativa strain. So
Word. Man, I
yeah.
feel like you know more than I do now.
Ah, I listened to a lot of grow podcasts over the pandemic,
Is
learning
that a
how to
thing for
grow
real?
weed. Oh yeah, there's a whole like home grow community because there's like cultivators and people who are making money off of it, but there's a lot of people that they grow for themselves and or they test genetics. So people who sell seeds, you can't just make a seed and it works. They have to grow a handful of those seeds to make sure that a certain percentage of the plants are successful and
Hmm.
flower them and get them all good. So there's a whole community of testers too, which is kind of weird. People just grow weed for they get seeds for free and they grow them and they smoke them themselves. But then it's helping the genetic companies learn. Yeah,
Interesting. I would
yeah.
figure
So
that it would be more quantified to test the genetics, but so it's just a subjective like I like these.
yeah, it's the quantifying aspects of it are, are they pest resistant? Are they disease
I gotcha.
resistant?
Okay.
Do they grow fast? Do they yield a lot? But at the end of the day, it really is effect based. So the better genetics companies breed based on effects, not yield.
Interesting.
But
Okay, that makes sense.
yield is what makes you sell the seeds more, because the commercial aspect of the industry just wants to make is it fast growing and does it yield a lot? That's all they really want. Does it look nice? Doesn't matter about effect. It's about money.
Bastards.
I know, and that's the other thing that's cool about growing for yourself is you get to smoke like medicinal plants that might not be on the market because they don't make people enough money.
Damn. Did you get like the THC percentage tested or anything, or is that like
I
I assume
haven't
that's
done
probably too
testing on any of it.
complicated?
Yeah, there's a lot of that, a lot of those companies around, and I don't know how much it costs though. I would be
I gotcha.
interested in doing it at some point just to do it, but no, I
Hmm. For round two of the documentary,
haven't.
Randy tests his weed for the first
Yeah,
time. Yeah.
I would love to like sell a weed based show or something, be like a weed guy who uh, you could reference the first time I ever smoked weed, and now,
Yeah, I mean, shit.
yeah.
I feel like you would be a great guest for one of those like cooking with weed shows. Like I don't know if you've seen those,
Oh
but they're kind
gosh,
of ridiculous.
two things I like. Let's set it up. I would
Yeah,
love it.
some of those like judges like, oh, I'm actually vegetarian. It's like you didn't tell them beforehand. Like, come on.
Yeah, vegetarian, and I only do CBD. I don't smoke. Like, why are you on this show? I have a book to promote. Oh, perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, cool, man. Well, this has been a fun conversation. Do you want to plug anything that you have? I don't
Uh.
know when this will be out, so I don't know if it's good for this weekend. But
Oh yeah, I'm not worried about it. Yeah, I'm on Twitter. I'm on Instagram at Randy Liedtke, RandyLiedtke. I did just start a podcast, but me and my friend Davey, we've been kind of a bit slow going on it. So
mhm.
I think it's on Spotify. It's we need to change the name. It's called Wunderjungs, and it's uh, German for Wonder Boys, but it's spelled Wunderjungs. Yeah, it's hard to promote. Um, yeah, we just started it. I'm going to post the second episode soon, and it's just silly, kind of improv based. The whole concept is we can't look anything up while we're talking, so we have to kind of just roll with the information that we think is true about something.
Okay, nice.
Yeah, that's the
Word.
loose basis of it. Other than that, lima beans. I would like to promote lima beans. They don't get eaten enough. I just cooked some yesterday. Very tasty.
What about fava beans?
Fava beans are good too. A lot of work if you get them fresh though. You have to shuck them and take the things off. I bought dried lima beans and hadn't done it in a long time. I would recommend it.
Do you have any insight into how to do dried fava beans correctly? Because I want to love them. I've had them and they've been perfect, but I can't ever do it right myself.
Dried ones.
Hmm.
I don't know if I've done it. I feel like I had a bit of a hard time with. I use a pressure cooker for most beans, so I would
Hmm.
suggest pressure cooker. Don't do a soak. Do a rinse
Okay.
to get any type of dirt or seed or rocks out, and then I would do pressure cook for probably 40 minutes, something
Okay.
around there. Depends on how old the beans are. For pinto beans, it's like 40 minutes, but if they're like, I have a big bag, so they're a couple years old now, so up to like 55, 60 minutes.
Interesting.
But
Okay.
yeah, pressure cooker, just water, no salt, or use a broth. I did a
Okay.
bone broth and some kombu kelp
Ooh.
broth, and then cooked the beans in that, and then they absorb all that flavor.
Word.
Yeah.
I didn't realize that you were such a bean connoisseur. Otherwise, I would have
Oh,
started off with
my
that.
mom is from my mom's from New Mexico, so I grew up pressure cooker pinto beans my whole life. So I have a
Word.
big old giant bag of Ness Farms from Estancia, New Mexico, pinto beans right now.
Damn. Well,
Yeah.
shit. I shouldn't have been asking about cum jokes. I should have been asking about beans this whole time. So.
Bean jokes. Yeah, we should do a bean pod.
Ah.
Ha!
Cool, man. Well, I guess I'll let you go then, Randy. It's been a pleasure talking to you, and I'll talk to you in the future.
Cool, bro. Nice talking to you.
Peace.